This is a CBS News special report. I'm Margaret Brennan in Washington. We are coming on the air with breaking news. The wait is over. Presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden has chosen Kamala Harris as his running mate. Harris is 56 years old, a former federal prosecutor, a former attorney general of the state of California, and she has represented that state in the Senate since 2017. The announcement was made just moments ago via text message to supporters. Some 83 days are left between now and Election Day, but even before Joe Biden officially clinched the Democratic Party's nomination for president back in early June, he had made clear he wanted a woman on the ticket beside him. And in recent weeks, he's interviewed a number of possible candidates, including a number of women of color. The choice of a running mate is arguably one of the most important decisions that he has made to date. He turned 78 years old shortly after Election Day and would be the oldest person to become president if elected. Let's go now to CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, this is an unconventional campaign. We got the text message just a few minutes ago. Senator Harris, tell me, what was the deciding factor?
Well, yes, and we should read this text, although I bet many of our viewers may be getting it themselves. Joe Biden here, it says, big news, I've chosen Kamala Harris as my running mate. Together with you, we're going to beat Trump. Add your name to welcome her to the team. The website appears to have been updated as well with a photo of the two of them. You know, Margaret, if you talk to many Democrats across the country who've been involved in these campaigns, rank and file voters, this is an inevitability that they were rooting for from the start. The combination of a former vice president who has universal name recognition now with a woman from the largest state, only the second African-American woman elected to the U.S. Senate, somebody who had been elected twice statewide in California. She is, of course, the former district attorney for San Francisco, the former attorney general of California, and told me in an interview last year that she hadn't thought about running for president until right after she was elected on election night 2016, and decided after talking to some people in the wake of the victory of the president, that perhaps it was something she should take a look at. And of course, many people will think to themselves, why would Joe Biden want to pick somebody who went after him in such a direct, personal way in that first debate last summer in Miami? But in reality, we will probably learn in the coming hours that Biden ultimately decided she is best equipped to join him in this endeavor. And remember the incredible pressure he's been facing since he announced in March that he would be picking a woman to not only pick a woman, but to pick a woman of color. Six black women were considered, among them the former National Security Advisor Susan Rice, two members of the House, and Stacey Abrams, the former Georgia lawmaker. There was a Latina governor. There was an openly lesbian senator, Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin, and Tammy Duckworth, the Iraq War veteran. But ultimately, Harris, arguably at this point the best known of this group, though didn't go as far as Elizabeth Warren, who was also considered, is now the pick. Hearing from a few folks inside the campaign and those that have worked for her before, that they're very excited by this. And we know that just in the last few hours, a heads up was given, if you will, to a lot, not only in the campaign, but around the Democratic Party, that the announcement was likely coming today because the Biden campaign understood they could no longer hold on to this much longer without it leaking out. Harris, as far as we know, is still here in Washington, lives just a few blocks from here. We'll see if she somehow snuck out. That's happened in the past, or if she's planning to make her way up to Delaware, perhaps to meet with the former vice president.
And Senator Harris is a historic pick for many reasons. The daughter of a Jamaican immigrant and an immigrant from India. She is Asian American. She is African American. She was looked at as a contender. She was a rival even before the moment of reckoning that we have now entered as a country when we talk about racial injustice. How much of a factor was that in her selection, and what will that mean in terms of mobilization for the vote itself?
Well, there was a lot of concern that were a African-American woman not chosen, there was the potential that African-American voters, Latino voters, and younger voters perhaps that want to see such stark diversity and important diversity on the ticket would stay home. Remember, that was a real issue for Hillary Clinton 4 years ago, especially in big Midwestern states like Michigan and Wisconsin, to some extent in Pennsylvania. And so there's been an understanding ever since election night 2016 that a lot more had to be done to motivate and draw out minority voters, younger voters who want to see this kind of a bold move. And it is a bold move. She's been described by many as a safe pick compared to some of the others. But let's not lose sight of the history. We've never had a woman vice president. We've never had a black woman run on a major party ticket before. And the added history of the fact that, yes, she would also be the first South Asian vice president, given that her mother is from India. So Biden understood that, resisted the calls and the questions about it all throughout the summer, would bristle at them, frankly, when asked, are you going to commit to picking a black woman? And he made clear, look, I'm considering a wide number of people. Regardless, my cabinet will look like the country, will be diverse. And he has also vowed to put a black woman on the Supreme Court should he be elected president and there be a vacancy there. But this will be compared in some ways to Ronald Reagan picking George H.W. Bush, one of his lead rivals, and we will see here in the coming days what the Democratic Party makes of the decision.
We certainly will. And with the CBS News latest battleground estimate that puts Biden ahead by about 10 points over Trump, over the current president, we will see if this moves the needle for some voters. I want to go to Capitol Hill to get the perspective from our correspondent there, Nancy Cordes, who has covered Senator Harris ever since she was sworn into office in 2017. She is the sitting junior senator from the state of California. Nancy, what is her reception on the Hill like? How is she viewed? What do you see as her main sort of legacy item as a lawmaker?
Well, she is viewed, Margaret, as a very formidable interrogator, a legacy from her role as California's Attorney General. As soon as she got here, she was placed on a quartet of very high-profile Senate committees, the Judiciary Committee, Homeland Security, Intelligence, Budget, a reflection of the fact that she was very adept at grilling major players in the Trump administration, and clearly from the very beginning also had higher ambitions. And so I spoke to a Senate aide a short time ago who described her this way. She's someone who can excite the base without upsetting moderates, and someone who combines a prosecutor's skill with the passion of an advocate. That gives you a sense of why she made the cut at the end of the day. And Senator Chris Coons, who, like former Vice President Joe Biden, is from Delaware. He's very close to Biden. Just told me a couple of minutes ago how excited he is about this pick. He says Senator Harris is a great friend and colleague whom I've gotten to see in action on the Judiciary Committee. She's smart, tough, warm, and engaging, and I've seen her take on leading Trump officials from Jeff Sessions to Bill Barr. She'll be a terrific partner. So that's some of the early reaction, Margaret. In fact, when she grilled Jeff Sessions a couple of years ago, he famously told her that she made him nervous. And certainly Democrats are hoping that she will make Vice President Mike Pence nervous when she goes up against him in their one and only debate.
Nancy Cordes on Capitol Hill, and we know that Joe Biden himself is expected to hold an event tomorrow in Wilmington, Delaware. He is at his home in Delaware today, and we expect that event tomorrow to be the first one where they appear side by side. The senator from California now joining
a CBS News special report. Kamala Harris has been nominated or selected by Joe Biden to be his running mate for the upcoming presidential election. Time now for our full forecast.